It was supposed to be a simple morning. Darius Thompson, a seasoned assistant United States attorney, walked into the Greenville Municipal Courthouse to contest a tax error on a modest family home his grandmother had left behind. As someone who had spent over a decade fighting human trafficking, corruption, and civil rights violations, Darius had stood in countless courtrooms, but today was different. Today, he wasn't in a federal court where his title commanded respect. He was in a small city court, where appearances spoke louder than resumes. He wore a crisp navy suit, carried neatly organized documentation, and despite a busy morning, which included an emergency motion from a defense team in a federal trafficking case, he had made it just in time. Or so he thought. As he entered the courtroom, he noted others arriving late, a white man in a blazer, a young woman in casual attire, none of whom received more than a passing glance. But when Darius's name was called, the atmosphere shifted. All eyes turned. Judge Charles Whitman, known for his stern demeanor, wasted no time. He chastised Darius for being late, cut off his explanation, and swiftly imposed a $750 fine for contempt of court. The punishment was harsh, especially for a civil hearing. But what made it even more unsettling was the disparity. Others had arrived late without reprimand. In that moment, Darius realized he wasn't just dealing with a property tax mistake. He had walked into a courtroom where bias didn't wear a hood, it wore a robe. And while he remained composed, his mind had already shifted. This wasn't just about defending himself anymore. It was the beginning of something far bigger. From the moment Darius Thompson stepped into the Greenville Municipal Courthouse, he sensed something was off. As a seasoned federal prosecutor, he was no stranger to courtrooms, procedures, or pressure. But today, the way people looked at him, not with respect, but with suspicion, told him everything he needed to know. He wasn't just a man arriving late. He was a black man arriving late, and that changed everything. Darius had been delayed for a valid reason. He just left an urgent federal briefing on a major human trafficking case, a case he was directly overseeing. He entered the courtroom holding both legal documents and the weight of responsibility. His only goal was to contest a property tax error on his late grandmother's home, a house that, for him, was more than just real estate. It was memory. It was legacy. He sat down, organized his folder, and waited. Before him, at least two people, a white man and a young woman, had arrived late. No one reprimanded them. No one even blinked. But when the bailiff called out, "Darius Thompson," the energy in the room shifted. Judge Charles Whitman, a white man with a silver mane and piercing gaze, stared at Darius as if he had committed a crime. "You're late, Mr. Thompson," he said coldly. "Do you think your time is more valuable than this court's?" Darius raised his hand in acknowledgement, remaining calm. "Your Honor, I sincerely apologize for the delay. I was attending to a federal matter involving." "Excuses don't excuse tardiness," the judge interrupted, his tone sharp. "This court operates on order and respect. If you don't understand that, maybe you should rethink how you conduct yourself. I'm fining you $750 for contempt." The sound of the gavel echoed like a challenge. In that moment, Darius was no longer just a man disputing taxes. He became a living example of how racial bias hides behind procedure. The fine was excessive. The tone was hostile. The disparity in treatment was obvious. He said nothing more, but inside, a storm had begun. After the session ended, Darius didn't leave. Instead, he stepped forward, opened his briefcase, and revealed something that silenced the room: his gold-embossed federal badge, unmistakable proof of his authority. "Your Honor," he said evenly, "I believe a proper introduction is in order. My name is Darius Thompson, Assistant United States Attorney for the Northern District of South Carolina." Judge Whitman froze. His hands stopped mid-motion. His expression drained of color. The room, which had just been going through the motions, became charged with tension. "I didn't come here today just to talk about taxes," Darius continued. "I came to ask a very simple question. Are the rules of this courtroom applied equally, to everyone, regardless of race, gender, or title?" The silence was deafening. Heads turned. A law student in the back furiously took notes. A middle-aged black man in the front row glanced over with quiet solidarity. Once outside, Darius got into his car and immediately began typing. He sent a detailed, nearly 10-page report to his supervisor at the Department of Justice. He included transcripts, timelines, behavior comparisons, and legal citations. He attached photos, notes, and direct quotes from the courtroom. Just a few hours later, his phone rang. On the line was Julia Harper, a senior U.S. attorney known for her sharp mind and no-nonsense leadership. Her tone was serious. "Darius, if what you wrote is accurate, this isn't just misconduct," she said. "This may be systemic." With that confirmation, the investigation began. Darius began digging deeper. He requested transcripts and sentencing records from Judge Whitman's courtroom. He analyzed patterns, and the patterns were clear. Black defendants were fined 3 times more often than white defendants for identical offenses. Payment plans were often denied to people of color, while white defendants were granted leniency. He reached out to local attorneys, former defendants, and courthouse staff. The response was overwhelming. Whispers turned into confessions. One court clerk, Mrs. Thompson, handed Darius a small notebook she had kept hidden for years. Inside were hundreds of handwritten entries, names, dates, case outcomes, and notes. "I knew something wasn't right," she said, holding back tears, "but I was too afraid to speak up." The story quickly leaked to the public. A law student who had witnessed Darius's exchange posted a full recount online. Within hours, it went viral. Hashtags like #EqualJusticeNow and #bias in the courts were trending across social media. People from all over the country began sharing their own courtroom stories. News outlets picked it up. Headlines read, "Federal Prosecutor Exposes Judicial Racism," and "Justice is Not Blind in Greenville." The pressure on Judge Whitman intensified. He was called into closed-door meetings. Behind the scenes, the foundation of his decades-long authority began to crack. The numbers didn't lie. The disparity was undeniable and devastating. A black mother had been fined $500 for contesting a zoning issue. Despite proving she was right, a young black man had been berated by the judge for being unemployed, while a white defendant with the same circumstances was let off with a warning. Protests erupted outside the courthouse. Activists held signs that read, "Justice should be blind," and "End bias now." Community leaders and advocacy groups joined together, calling not only for Whitman's resignation but for reform throughout the entire judicial system. Darius, however, stayed focused. He declined interviews. He didn't care about media attention or public spectacle. This wasn't about ego. This was about integrity. One Monday morning, a quiet press release was issued from the courthouse. Judge Charles Whitman had officially resigned. No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a statement saying that he believed it was in the best interest of the community. But for Darius, and for those who had been watching closely, it was more than a resignation. It was the first crack in a wall that had stood too long. Months after the confrontation that changed everything, Darius Thompson stood once again in the very courthouse where it all began. But this time, he wasn't there to contest a tax dispute. He had been invited to speak at the inauguration of a new judicial ethics center, a space born from the very storm he helped ignite. The walls had been repainted. New signs welcomed visitors in multiple languages, and the culture inside the building had begun to shift. Darius walked through the halls slowly, noting the small but powerful changes. Payment plans offered more fairly. Court staff trained in bias awareness. Oversight committees reviewing rulings with transparency. But beyond the policies, what struck him most were the people, young lawyers who had written to him. Law students who now saw the justice system as something they could shape rather than fear. As he took the podium, he looked out at a room filled with judges, clerks, activists, and everyday citizens. His voice was steady, but resolute. Justice isn't just about what's written in the law, it's about how we apply it, and who we choose to listen to. The applause that followed was thunderous. Yet in his heart, Darius felt something quieter, a deep sense of responsibility. The road ahead would still be long, and the fight for equality never truly ends. But now, the silence had been broken, and justice finally had a voice.